When Reagan and his administration explicitly said that an educated proletariat is the most dangerous thing to America, this is exactly what he meant. The unaliver of that CEO was valedictorian and top of his class for his prestigious private school. He had a plethora of writings criticizing the system. He left a bag full of monopoly money as a message for police to find. You can have your opinions about that man, but you can't say that he wasn't an educated individual. And it's been that way for every single revolutionary, which is why education is such a threat. Why do you think the CIA suddenly became so interested in the Black Panther Party once they started giving free lessons and schooling to lower class Black communities on their civil liberties and rights? Yet the United States government was at the same time implementing socialist movements of the Black Panther Party, specifically taking directly from them the funding of free school lunch to school kids in America. And when Reagan's administration started making efforts into the war in Vietnam, and all of the students at UFC started protesting because of their education in said social issue, guess who pulled the trigger to get them taken out? Anti-intellectualism is the biggest tool for fascism. To be able to suppress education is to be able to longer suppress their freedom. These are lessons we can learn directly from Black abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, who taught himself how to read and was adamant about the education of Black slaves in order to achieve true freedom. He became a leader for a political revolution and a civil rights revolution because of his education. When you have presidents like Ronald Reagan that directly quote that protesters are fascists and dangerous to democracy, and that public education is a threat, how much clearer can it be? And when you have the resurgence of presidents saying that education is too woke or turning kids into fascists again, at a time where the political climate is again criticizing a bourgeois or an elitist class, what else could that mean except that suppressing knowledge in this age means that we're closer and closer to dismantling a system? We have quite literally learned this from birth of the history of the suppression of education and what that means and what acknowledging what education can do for us can grant us. Which is why I'm such a heavy activist for education. And I will always criticize influencers that look like me specifically that try to encourage and advocate for other people to not go to college either. Because it's always been the point for people to look like us to not go to college. It's always been the point for people that look like us to be mere laborers or gear in a system. And education is 100% a form of protest and path to self-reliance, no matter who you look like. But the important part of this entire thing is that intersectionality is key. You must advocate for women, for disabled people, for people of color, for people with different sexual identities, people that come from different countries, people that live in a different social class or social environment than you. Because it's not just education that's a threat, it's the unification of class that's the true enemy. Homophobia, racism, misogyny, classism, ableism, etc. are all tools in order to maintain the class system. It's not new. You have been able to see it in history books for ages, which is why I am such a proponent for critical analysis and connecting new media to old media. It's the same reason they're trying to take out fundamental textbooks and replace them with programs like PragerU, which have already been implemented in states in the United States. And you don't have to go to college to educate yourself. That is not the point of this video. Don't feel bad if you can't afford it. Don't feel bad if you don't have access to it, because frankly, that's all on purpose, and that's not your fault. But I have videos on my page highlighting how to access peer-reviewed journals of anything you're interested in. There are free lectures on YouTube, and Crash Course is a perfect example of free YouTube media that's easily accessible and easily digestible to understand subjects. And if you have old high school textbooks, please reread them, which has been my favorite form to educate myself again these past couple weeks. It's also important to note that if you are joining social movements, to be especially wary of those that are exclusionary, for example, TERF movements. Trans exclusionary movements, anti-Black movements, and anti-immigration movements are all a swift pipeline into alt-right ideology and white nationalism. And yes, ignorance is bliss, but there comes a certain point where you have to acknowledge that that bliss is nothing more than a mirage.